My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. All right. We are looking at the doctrine of the resurrection of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Let me reiterate that no one denies that the resurrection began and led to, gave birth to, if you please, the new heaven and the new earth. So we've been examining the doctrine of the new creation from the Old Testament prophecies that foretold the coming of the new creation. We're currently in Isaiah chapter 66. Isaiah chapter 66 foretold some extremely, just remarkable things that about the new creation, the day of the Lord, that give us direct insight. Now, I want to share this with you. I touched on it briefly. Isaiah 66 foretold the coming of the Lord in flaming fire. Well, now watch this. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, a text that critical scholars agree, Paul is drawing directly from Isaiah 66. Well, the coming of the Lord in flaming fire in Isaiah chapter 66 would be the coming of the Lord to bring in the new creation. That means it's the coming of the Lord for the resurrection. Okay? Why is that significant? It is significant because Paul said, and again, I understand this is slight reiteration, but boy, this is so critically important because it allows us to see the context and the framework. If it is true that Paul is drawing directly from Isaiah chapter 66 in his prediction of the day of the Lord in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. And by the way, scholars such as Greg Beale, N.T. Wright, R.T. France, just scholar after scholar after scholar acknowledge Paul is citing directly Isaiah 66 in his prediction of the coming of the Lord in flaming fire. By the way, Peter's almost undoubtedly alluding to the same text, when the earth and the elements that are therein shall be burned up. All right? But anyway, you got to catch the power of this. Paul, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, said the coming of the Lord in flaming fire would be to bring vengeance, quote, on those who are troubling you, unquote. That is, those who were persecuting the Thessalonians at that very time, those who are troubling you. Present participle. Now watch this. It wasn't the Romans persecuting the Thessalonians. It wasn't the Roman Catholic Church persecuting the Thessalonians. It wasn't the Islamic nation persecuting the Christians at Thessalonica. It was the Jews. Acts chapter 17 proves this beyond any doubt. So, the coming of the Lord in flaming fire to bring in the new creation would be to bring vengeance on those who were, at the time Paul wrote Thessalonians, persecuting the Thessalonians, and to give the Thessalonians relief from that persecution. So, if the coming of the Lord in flaming fire in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 is the coming of the Lord in flaming fire of Isaiah chapter 66 to bring in the new creation, i.e. the resurrection, then since the coming of the Lord in flaming fire in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 would be in vengeance on the Jews who were at that time persecuting the Thessalonian Christians, and if that coming of the Lord in flaming fire for the resurrection and the new creation was to give those Thessalonians 2,000 years ago relief from that then ongoing persecution, then it must be true that the resurrection and the coming of the new heaven and the new earth was to be in the lifetime of the Thessalonians, when God brought vengeance against the Jews who were at that time persecuting them. That is absolutely inescapable. Paul's not talking about some far future persecution of an unknown generation of believers. He was writing to the Thessalonians, who were at that time being persecuted by the Jews, and Paul promised that the Jews would be the recipients of tribulation when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven, and those Thessalonians being persecuted at that time would receive relief from that then ongoing persecution at the coming of the Lord in flaming fire, fulfilling Isaiah chapter 66, which once again means the coming of the Lord in judgment of the Jews for persecuting the saints, and to give the saints relief from that then ongoing persecution, that coming of the Lord in flaming fire to bring in the resurrection and the new creation was to be in the first century. Unless you want to say that the Thessalonians are 2,000 years old being persecuted by the Jews today. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. Hey, get a copy of my book, In Flaming Fire. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Order the book, In Flaming Fire. I have an in-depth exegesis of 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, demonstrating that it's in fulfillment of Isaiah 66, proving resurrection, new creation arrived in the first century. So we'll see you on the flip side.